Outrage sweeps Britain after the European Court of Human Rights ordered the release of Abu Qatada, dubbed Osama bin Laden's right-hand man in Europe. It's the latest in a string of judgments that have overruled domestic decisions, reinforcing the opinion that the EU is interfering in matters it has nothing to do with. And as RT's Laura Smith reports, patience with the EU is running thin.
A sovereign land with its own queen, its own currency and its own parliament, but laws made by someone else. This building houses what we in the UK call the Supreme Court, but in practice it's supreme in name only. Despite being the highest court in the land, when it comes to human rights, if you don't like the way your case has gone at home, you can take it abroad to France. And decisions made in Strasbourg can overrule any made here. The European Court of Human Rights was set up after World War II to avoid the persecution of minorities by the state, but now it's been derailed.
And it was never anticipated after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, after the terrors perpetrated by certain tyrannical governments, that the court now would be protecting the criminal and not the victim.
Delays and controversy have dogged the European Court in Strasbourg. There's a backlog of up to 8 years, and when cases are decided, judgments are often bizarre. In 2010, the court decided to give prisoners the right to vote after a petition by John Hirst, who spent much of his life behind bars after killing his landlady. The UK is still refusing to implement the ruling.
It makes me physically ill to even contemplate having to give the vote to anyone who is in prison.
Nausea aside, it could also cost a fortune.
The last time that we looked at this, the cost of complying with judgments under the European Convention of Human Rights was about £2.1 billion a year.
That's $3.3 billion plus another $2.8 billion in associated one-off costs. In other areas, an immigration ruling means a convicted Nigerian rapist gets to stay in the UK because of his right to a family life. And most recently, the European Court of Human Rights ruled hate preacher Abu Qatada, dubbed bin Laden's right-hand man in Europe, can't be deported back to Jordan. He's now due to be released onto the streets of Britain.
This is somebody who stands up and publicly spews hatred about everything that our democracy is and stands for, and yet we can't get rid of him because of the European Convention on Human Rights.
Sitting in Strasbourg are 47 judges, one from each signatory country. So far, so fair, except none of them were elected by the people of the countries they're making law for.
We've got a system of law and order in this country that's worked for many, many years, with the seat or the mother of all parliaments. Why do we need Strasbourg or Brussels to tell us what we can and cannot do? The answer is we don't, so therefore I want British law for British people.
Those who aren't calling for the UK to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights altogether are demanding reforms to stop Strasbourg making decisions on what should be sovereign issues.
The court has to be more focused on fundamental civil and political rights, not interfering in the daily lives and in the administration of the criminal justice system in the member states of the Council of Europe.
Without reforms, there's a risk of throwing the baby out with the bathwater as nations pull out of the Human Rights Court, undermining it, leaving those in countries with weaker human rights protections entirely vulnerable. Laura Smith, RT, London.
Meanwhile,